All right. Well, good morning. I'm glad that you're here this morning. If you don't know me, my name is Bob, and that really won't come up again, so you don't have to remember it. Anyway, so here's the thing. We're talking about marriage. I know that we just passed Valentine's Day, right? And some of you guys, I would say, did any of you forget it? But you would be dead, and so you wouldn't be here with us to raise your hand. Right? But maybe some of you had already dropped the ball. You didn't buy the flowers. You didn't buy the is there anything besides flowers that people buy? Chocolate? Yeah, that's right. So I didn't buy that, obviously. But anyway, we're going to talk about love for this week and for next week. I'm excited. We've got some great stuff today. And then Pastor Jason is going to tell us next week about some incredible stuff too. But here's my hope, is because, let me start with the thing, is that we have so many preconceived ideas about love and about relationships and about marriage, right? And so there's all these things that we think love is going to be and it's going to do for us, right? And so we actually kind of hold out hope that marriage is going to, and romance and intimacy, that it will make us happy maybe, or that it will fulfill us, or even this big thing, that it's going to be enough to give our lives purpose and meaning. And so one of the hurdles in this quest for happily ever after, which is the title of this week and next week, one of the hurdles in our quest for happily ever after is to get past what we think we know and on to the truth. And that's one of the great joys of being married, right? So if you're a man, like one of the first 5 years of marriage are the stage of getting past what you thought you knew about women, right? And getting on to reality. And if you're a woman, it's getting past what you thought you understood about men. And you kind of learn this whole other thing. And it's amazing because over Valentine's Day, what my family did is that we moved from one house to another. How many of you guys have had a marriage that survived a move yet? Anybody? No, but it's great. I mean, we still love each other, and I don't think anybody yelled profanities at anybody. But anyway, but it's a challenge, right? You get in these pressure cooker environments, and you realize how different men and women are, and we've had all these discussions, and here's my list of priorities, and here's your list of priorities, and those don't match at all. And so as you're married for a little while, you realize just how different we are. And so one of the things that we're going to really hope to do over the next 2 weeks is that we can get some foundational truth of what marriage is, right? Like, what's the purpose of marriage? What does marriage actually promise to give us? And then what's the key in making it do what it's supposed to do? How many of you guys have ever bought something and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do? You're like, you push the button and it doesn't do it. Like, how do I make this do? And so one of the keys of making marriage and love and all that do what it's supposed to do is that first you have to understand what is it supposed to do. And so that's our hope over the next 2 weeks. And so this series, I want to say, because you go to church around Valentine's Day, and if you're not married, if you're older, if you've been married, or if you're divorced, or if you're younger, and you just hope someday someone will marry you, you think, oh, this has got nothing to do with me, and you kind of think, well, I can just tune out. But this message is for so much more than just married couples. This is especially important if you haven't yet been married, because your expectation, understanding of what marriage is and what it's for and what it will do for you will determine so much about how you function in the run-up to marriage. It'll determine so much about who and what you look for as you try to find that person, right? And so it ends up defining your experience with it because of your expectations going into it. And then obviously, if you're already married, it's going to be very important, because if you gain understanding now for what this thing is and how to make it work, then you can begin to expect that your marriage will produce good things. And here's what I mean. How many of you guys have ever seen those ancient meat grinders, right? You've seen them. They're like this big churning arm, and you feed a big block of meat into it. Hopefully it's not your meat. It's not connected to you at the moment. And you churn this arm, and this paste of stuff comes out, and it's meat. But here's the thing. That looks really similar to those old school ice cream churns, right? And so you churn the ice cream and it makes ice cream. So if you walk up to a meat grinder that someone's churning and you think it's an ice cream churner and you put your bowl there and you're expecting a nice cool bowl of Rocky Road and that bowl gets filled up with some juicy meat paste and you dig your spoon in there and take a bite of it, you're going to be disappointed, to say the least, right? And that's really the thing, is if you're married and you've got this thing, you've got to understand. Now, a meat churn, or whatever it's called, grinder probably, is a great thing, right? And you can make some great things with that meat, but you need to understand that it's meat, right? And if your expectations are set right, meat tastes good. But if you're expecting ice cream, that meat doesn't taste very good. And that's the whole thing, is that when we understand what this thing is, then we understand what to expect, and we're much further along. But then it's also for people who, for one reason or another, are not married. Like maybe you've outlived your spouse, and that's a really hard thing. Or maybe you've been divorced, and that's a really difficult thing. Or maybe, it just hasn't ever happened for you. And maybe you've come to the point where you've resigned that it isn't. Or maybe you're still holding out hope and handing out cards with phone numbers on, or whatever it is, right? You're still in the game, but for one reason or not, you're not married. And here's the thing: a correct biblical understanding of marriage puts it back in its proper place of priority, and it allows you to still live a life of meaning and beauty that's completely separate from that thing. Because it's really challenging in a culture that I call like the Cinderella story culture, where everything is about happily ever after and it's about love, and we all talk about marriage as if it's what defines our life. But what if you don't have that anymore? You feel like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be? If God's big plan for my life is marriage and kids and all that stuff, what if I don't have that? What meaning do I have? And to understand that this thing is a great gift, but it's got a whole different place in your life of priority, that you can have meaning and you can have purpose that is completely separate from that. So this is an important talk for everyone, because all of us have inherited a cultural narrative or a cultural understanding of love. That means we've grown up. You can't see your own culture most of the time. Does that make sense? How many of you guys can recognize the differences of other cultures? Go ahead and raise your hand. You're all racist. No, I'm just kidding. Trick you, right? No, you notice cultural differences between you and other people, right? But guess what? As distinct as those are, you have your own culture, and you're colored by the culture you live in. It impacts everything. And so we have an inherited cultural understanding of love and marriage. Our culture has defined it for us, and what we then sometimes do is we take that and then we look through the Bible and we kind of bend the Bible to make it say what the cultural understanding says, and we tend to live with more of a cultural picture of how this works than really how God lined it up. And so we've inherited this thing that's generations upon generations old. And the reason I say this is that we have this thing that true love defines you, right? And so that's our cultural understanding of love. It's the what's that one guy's name? Show me the money, you complete me, you have me at hello, all that stuff. What is it? The Jerry Maguire. We have that you complete me. Like, that's our cultural picture of love, right? That there's this person out there, and as soon as you meet them, you're going to go, oh, it's my other half, right? And so we have this thing, and that's what defines your life. And so this is the cultural thing, that true love defines you. There's the Princess Bride, marriage is what we've come here for today, marriage, right? And there's that, and this guy dies, and you know what brings him back to life? That he had experienced true love. He's dead, he comes back, and true love. And true love is able to motivate him out of death. Crippled body, now he can walk, now he can defeat the whole enemy, and he's overtaken the world because he has encountered finally true love and marriage, right? And so, anyway, that's our cultural understanding. And the thing is, with this cultural understanding of love, no amount of money or courage or accomplishment can make you happy without your happily ever after. That is the defining hinge pin, and also even the poorest pauper who finds their happily ever after, and that the bliss that comes with that, no amount of material possessions or experiences can match that. So that makes this the defining factor. And so if you're conditioned by this cultural narrative, you will spend your life in search of another person who defines you. Or the problem is you've already found a person and they haven't defined you. And so you will live your life plagued with frustration and unmet expectation at how your spouse has failed to give you happily ever after. Because that's what culture tells you they're supposed to do. So if you're not happy, you go, well, I'm not sure what your problem is, but something's not right. It's you, right? Some of you guys have ever had that feeling, like, something's not right in my life, and it's obviously not me, so it must be you, right? So figure it out and fix it, and then get back to me tomorrow, okay? And so that's the thing, is that we have this general sense of unrest because we're not everything we want to be or want to have or want to feel, and our culture tells us that comes from the person holding our hand next to us. And so if we don't have it, then something's really wrong. And so here's the thing. This didn't start with America. It didn't start with Hollywood or even with Princess Bride. This goes way back. The idea of the soulmate and happily ever after is one of the defining philosophies of Western civilization. I don't know if you guys really think about this that much. But that's what, that's why I get into this. I have nothing else to do to think about this stuff during the day. So anyway, it's one of the defining characteristics. So if you look at most of the rest of history and most of the rest of the world, marriage was defined by who? Your parents, right? Your parents picked you a mate, you went and married that mate, and marriage was really a facility of family, not of love and romance. And that was really the purpose of marriage. Now, Western civilization has come along with this new idea that no, you don't let your parents pick you. That's crazy. What if I don't love them? What if I don't feel for them when I feel for somebody else? And so that idea sounds crazy, just to understand in the crazy-o-meter, we're the one that's crazy in our culture because we're in the minority of all of human history when it comes to this experience. Isn't it weird to think about that? That you're the minority, and that most of the world, someone else looks at you and goes, they got this and this and this, let's go find someone else. Here's a good match, and they put you together. And rather than this idea that we're searching out there endlessly for this person, and then we find them and we go, oh, it's the glass slipper, it fits, now I've found the one, right? And so we're the ones that are different. In fact, this idea traces all the way back to Plato, 3.5 centuries before Jesus. This guy named Plato, all right, he tells this mythical story of early humans, and we have a picture, and they're called super people, okay? And so these super people, according to Plato, these early humans were superior to us in every way, mentally, physically, emotionally, everything, right? These guys were superior in every way. And these super people, they had one body, but 2 faces, 4 arms, and 4 legs. I think there might be a picture coming, so we can just...
No picture.
Is there?
No.
Oh, there's no picture? Oh, okay. So imagine it, right? First you have to imagine a chubby, round guy, okay? And so... Don't look at me. Anyway, so... Look somewhere else. You guys are all looking here like I'm an example of that. So anyway, so there's this like kind of more round person, and then they have 2 faces that are kind of facing away from each other, and then they've got arm, leg, arm. And they didn't actually walk the way we walked because of all of these appendages. They just did cartwheels everywhere. Right? And so one of these faces was male and one was female, right? And I'm not going to describe the rest of the appendages, but that's what they did, okay? And so what happened is that these were super, because they've got all of the intelligence of women, but they've got all of the great attributes of each of the sexes combined together. And so they go, oh, well, these people were insanely smart. They had their emotions in balance. They had all this kind of stuff figured out. They were in touch with their emotions, right? All these things that we think the others are falling short in, they had them all, and they had all these extra arms and legs. And so they were super people. And so what happened is according to the myth, these super people were getting together and they were plotting to climb Mount Olympus, which would have been like kind of heaven in the Greek world, and they were going to set upon the gods, right? Which means attack them. And so they were going to climb Mount Olympus, they were going to defeat the gods and basically take over the world, right? And so what happened is Zeus, the Greek god, came along with his Zeus sword, and he sliced them in half, cleaving them, one from another, right down the middle, right between the two faces, okay? And so now each face had 2 arms and 2 legs in its own parts, right? So that's what Zeus did. And so he divided their potential, and then he scattered all the different halves all across the world. Because if these 2 halves found their way together, their potential would then again be unlocked, and they could find their way in enough number and set upon the gods again. And so this tragic story is born, that there's all these people whose other half is out there somewhere, and you've got to go find them. And once you find them, it unlocks all of the pent-up potential that you were supposed to have. And so it's pretty crazy, this story, right? And even though this is mythical and it's fictitious, Plato is relaying something that he believes about life and its meaning. He's talking about this perceived whole in the human experience. He's exploring the idea that this whole is caused by the fact that there is some other person out there who is somehow a part of you. And you're not complete until you find them. And then once the 2 of you are reconnected, a power and potency comes into being, and your real life potential is unlocked. And as we would say today, then happily ever after becomes possible. Now here's the thing, all right? Maybe Plato shaped all of Western culture's understanding, or maybe he was just pointing out how he saw people thinking and living. We don't know which came first. I don't know if it's a chicken or an egg issue, right? He could have just seen everybody and thought, man, they're crazy, and he could have made up this story to illustrate it. Or he could have made up the story and then everyone goes, I love that, right? And you may think that sounds silly, but how many of us watch a romantic movie and go, how come you're not like that? And so like we see these things and we go, oh, I don't know if that's real, but I want it either way, okay? And so one of those 2 happen. Either way, this story, it speaks to how we view love. It speaks to our hopes for it. It speaks to what we see as the key to life. You see, this idea, it makes for great romantic movies and songs, but the question we need to answer now is this how God designed love and marriage to work? Because as neat as it looks, and as much as you might be able to squeeze your spouse into that mold, the question is, if you still eat it thinking it's ice cream, it's still meat no matter what. So you got to figure out what is it, and then plan your expectation around what God planned it to be. And so here's the thing. I want to look at how Jesus describes marriage. In Mark 10, 6 through 8. He says, but at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. And for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And the 2 will become one flesh, so that they are no longer 2, but one flesh. So here's the thing. According to Jesus, happily ever after is built, not found. Happily ever after is built, not found. So I want you to look really closely at the language used there. He says there were 2 distinct whole individuals. God created them male and female. They were both whole and they were distinct. Right? And so the point of marriage is that they are united, not reunited. Right? God didn't create the male and female cleaved apart from each other and then reunites them. There were two distinct creations that God then united in marriage. It says that the two became one flesh. Okay? And so the act of marriage itself is a declaration of two becoming one. Right? And so it's the declaring of it. So when you get married, that's when they declare it. But then the journey of marriage is the process of the two becoming one. And so here's what I mean. It's declared and it's all set in motion on one day. We get all dressed up. We walk down an aisle. We say, I do. They say, I do. And then someone says, I now declare you husband and wife. And then you say, then they kiss the bride. And some people do it nice. And some people do it really awkward and embarrass everybody. Right? And so there's all these things that happen on that day. But it didn't make you one flesh in reality, right? You're declared one flesh. And so then you begin the process of making that declaration a reality. And so getting married is being declared going from 2 to 1. And then being married is the journey of making that declaration reality. So if you're acting under the influence of our soulmate super people myth, then for you, marriage is the end of the story, right? Game over, you win, right? You got married, you found the one, congratulations, everything is awesome, right? I mean, you've made it to the point. Everything is done now. All you got to do is enjoy the ride, right? If you view it that way, that's how it goes. That's how every storybook is. That's how all that stuff works. But Scripture does not say anything about a pre-existent metaphysical bond between you and some other person, right? And you may think that it was fated to happen and that God designed it. I mean, we lived on the same street together, and then they moved, but guess what? They moved a mile away. And then we found each other again in high school, right? Well, because they're still in the same district. That is not that mysterious, right? But we found you had history together, so you found, but we have this idea, and you can look at it and you go, oh man, look at all these points where our stories touched. It was like this mystical universe dance that we didn't even know we were dancing, and so romantic, right? And you can really think that, but the Scripture doesn't say anything about a pre-existent bond between you and some other person. It doesn't talk about there being a person out there that God has already somehow connected you to, and you simply now need to find them. And the funny thing is anytime we talk about this, people start getting really uncomfortable. Well, I don't know about that. I've always been raised to believe that God had this one person for me, right? Well, that's fine. Let's sit down and look. In the Bible, where does it say that? And we have to understand, again, we're way more conditioned in this by our cultural understanding than we are by what Scripture tells us. Ouch. And so, the funny thing is that's in the notes we planned that. Now I have no idea what I'm talking about. Our cultural understanding, it puts all the emphasis on finding the one. So for us, if we operate under that understanding, the search is everything, right? Scripture puts the emphasis on becoming one. Notice the difference. Culture tells you you've got to find the one. Scripture says you've got to become one. So according to Scripture, it's what you do after you choose actually has a much bigger impact than who you choose. See, what you do after you choose has a much bigger impact than who you choose. See, if you see marriage as the finish line rather than the starting point, you're going to be setting yourself up for real trouble. Because what happens once you're a few years in and it's not happily ever after? What happens then? What happens, I'll tell you, as you begin to question. Maybe they aren't the one. Maybe they aren't the one. And once that thought is sown into your mind, you are in for real trouble. Because everything that happens from there on will reinforce that idea. And then the only logical conclusion is at some point, I must have picked the wrong person. I've got to find an exit ramp. And then you're just waiting it out. What do? Do we wait till these kids are grown? Or do you go, well, we're fighting so much, we might as well just cut it down and just go from there? And I'm not belittling this. I'm not shaming people who have been divorced. Like no one goes, hey, you know what I'm going to do today just to spite everyone else in the church? I'm going to chop off my arm. That'll show them. So please don't get that. Because a lot of times, and then sometimes we can talk about this and like, oh, you're such a failure. Like, oh no. Like, I understand this is an incredibly painful thing, and you wouldn't do it unless everything was majorly broken. Right? And so I get that. But I think one of the real issues is, again, we came into this with this understanding that it's a bipolar issue. It's either the right one or the wrong one. And so once we have that mindset, you're in for so much trouble. And it's a hard place to come back from. According to Jesus, the key to happily ever after is building oneness with the one you've already been united with. The key to your happiness, to the value of your marriage, is learning to build oneness with the one you've already been united with. Soulmate relationships are built, they're not discovered. Okay? Soulmate relationships are built, they're not discovered. You become one. According to the scripture, it says they were two, but now they are one. And so the biggest key to happily ever after is what you do after you say, I do. And if you're looking for something to put on Facebook, that's why I wrote that way. It sounds pithy, doesn't it? The key to happily ever after is what you do after you say, I do. Now I want to qualify that just a little bit. Because there's not one soulmate out there for you. There's not one right person, unless you're already married, then there is just one right person, right? So there's not just one right person out there. But there are plenty of people who are wrong for you. So if you're still single, there are plenty of people who are wrong for you. Based on your background and your interests and your personality, there are going to be people that you are more likely to have conflict with. There are some people who are more likely to stab you with a fork after a year of marriage than others, right? And so you need to know which ones is this going to get bad with. And so here's the thing. That's why at Grace Union, we require, if anyone's married at the church or by our pastor, that they do what's called premarital counseling. And it sounds super scary and awkward, but all it means is that we sit down and we take like an evaluation, and it goes through and it asks you everything about your life. And then it asks the other person everything about everything. And then through the magic of algorithms or something, it compares them. And then it spits out a report and says, hey, guess what? You guys grew up differently in this area and in this area. And you see money differently. And you see family responsibilities differently. And you see gender roles differently. And you see this differently. And you see sexuality differently. All these things. And it compares them. And so it actually tells you, like, you're conflicted or you're harmonious, and it gives you a grade along that spectrum. And it's not a pass or fail, like, well, sorry, Bob. I get your test results like the marriage is next week. Go ahead and cancel that cake. We're not going to. No, it's not that. It's not that. But what it is what it's saying is that, listen, I'm not saying you don't love each other. I'm not saying you won't make it. But to become one, you have a lot further of a journey with this person than you might have with someone else. Now, here's the thing. Most of the time we take these tests, 99% of the time, people have picked very well. It just reaffirms that. It says, listen, you guys are already pretty closely matched up here. You shouldn't have that hard of a time. Now, there's been one time where it was like a scary test result that came, and it like the result was even glowing when I printed it out. It was like, and it was like this super awkward thing. I called people up, like, guess what? And so, anyway, and it turned out, you know what happened? They broke up before the marriage. And you go, well, that's probably good, because they would have, she would have stabbed him with the fork, right? And so, anyway, that's the thing. There are some people that it's a much longer journey into oneness. So here's the thing. Do your best to pick well, but remember that oneness is something that two people set their target on and they pursue together. That's how it happens. It's not a needle in a haystack finding the one who was cut away from you in a pre-life kind of a thing. And so this biblical truth, I hope you get this, is incredibly hopeful. This is incredibly hopeful because it's never a lost cause because you just chose wrong. I've probably mentioned this before, but it broke my heart a couple of years ago. There was this really famous Hollywood couple that were like the example of Hollywood couples because sometimes those relationships don't even last long enough to announce and then they're over. And so this couple had been married for 35 years. And then the news got out that they were splitting up, and they interviewed the woman. And she was being very kind and not like insulting him and saying that it's because he picks his boogers at the dinner table or whatever it was. And she says, well, you know, he's great, but I think I finally just came to the point where I realized he's not my soulmate. So I better get about the business of going out and finding my soulmate. Oh my goodness. Oh goodness, this is crazy. And so this truth is incredibly liberating. No matter what problem you've come into, no matter how close to teetering on the edge you are today, or how far past the edge you are, right? It's something that can be built. It is something, oneness is something we build. And so happily ever after, happily ever after is built. One flesh is something we become. And now we're going to move along. Here's the thing. Love is more than a feeling. It's a verb, and I know that's two songs in one sentence. Love is more than a feeling. It's a verb. The act of loving your spouse carries the unification process forward. All right? Here's the thing. We talk a lot about loving people, but often we're talking about an emotion or a fondness. We're not talking about love because we say things like, man, I love that dude, but he's really stupid. Right? Like, I love that person, but, and it's funny, but here's the thing. Can love exist in this way where our inner feelings are not substantiated by our actions and words? Can love exist in a situation where our inner feelings are not substantiated by our actions and words? People say, well, I love my spouse, but I just don't express myself. Well, maybe you feel fondly about your spouse, but loving your spouse is expressing love to your spouse. Right? And so there's these situations where we think we can feel one way and excuse actions that don't support those feelings because it's how I feel inside that matters. No, it's not. It's absolutely not. And so here's the thing. You may feel amazing towards your spouse. You may appreciate all that they do for you. You may see yourself and them together forever. But if you have not expressed that in actions that they can feel and participate in, then it's not love and it has no impact on your relationship together. I'll give you a second because that's a lot. No matter how you feel inside, if it's not expressed in a way that the two of you can participate in it together, then it's not real. And it has no bearing on your partnership together. Amen. Love is dealt. It's not felt. Amen. That's right. Love is dealt. It's something you deal out. It's not something you feel. So many people miss the oneness, and this is tragic because so many of them will stay together forever and they'll be missing it forever, right? And I applaud the commitment to the oath. I applaud it, but we're missing what it can be. So many people miss the oneness that they can have. They miss out on the happily ever after because they're not actually loving in a way that unifies them. They're actually loving in a way that divides them because they think that what matters is what they feel inwardly that the other person can't feel, taste, touch, or see. So here's the thing. 1 Corinthians 13 describes love from God's perspective. And we're going to read through it, but I want you to really notice as we read that this description is all about things you do. Okay? Verse 4 starts like this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, it always perseveres. Love never fails.
Amen.
Guys, to actively love your spouse in the way that that passage describes, it will foster a oneness that will nourish your relationship and your soul.
Amen.
You were built to love people. And your spouse is this incredible partner that you've been given by God to learn how to love. And you know why? Because it's scary to love without that commitment.
That's
How many of you
right.
guys have ever gotten your feelings hurt because you did something really nice for someone and they didn't reciprocate? You see, all of these outside relationships, there's no contract saying that they have to be nice back. But you've got a spouse who contractually has to be nice back. That's part of the deal. I'm being serious, right? They said so. They promised to, right? And so that's the deal. And so you have the freedom to be extravagant and give yourself away and come out of your shell and be unhinged and take chances expressing yourself to a person that has to do the same thing. And no other relationship guarantees that. You see, God gave you a spouse so you can learn how to love the way you were built to love. And if you love your spouse the right way, you know what will happen? You'll begin to love other people better.
Amen.
You see, when someone's a real jerk and they don't know how to be nice, I feel sorry for their spouse.
That's right.
Because that's who they are. If that marriage relationship is teaching them how to love, they'll be able to love other people in a way that's appropriate.
That's right.
And so marriage, man, it's this incredible gift that God has given you. And if you live and love the right way within it, it'll change your entire life and the way that you coexist with people. And so to actively love your spouse in this way, the way the passage describes, it'll nourish your soul. The question we need to ask ourselves and the assignment that we need to give ourselves are, in my actions toward my beloved, am I displaying these things? And we're going to go through this list here in Corinthians. So in my actions, am I displaying patience? What does being patient with them look like in action? That's a different kind of question, right? Because we always think of patience as an internal thing. But how does patience act in relation to my spouse? In relation to their annoying quirks and habits and annoyance, and in relation to the things that I've asked them to do that they haven't done, or the things I've asked them to not do that they've done, or on and on and on. How does patience displayed in this relationship? Kindness. You know what's funny is that some things we just kind of know what they mean. And we used to talk about being kind, and I thought, I don't even really know what that means. I can't say it, I can do it. But here's what kindness means. It's the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. It's the quality of being generous and friendly and considerate. And so the question is what am I doing that displays generousness to my spouse? Generosity is the right way to say that. Generousness, right? Well, how am I displaying generosity to my spouse? How am I displaying friendliness? How am I displaying consideration? Because all of those things are kindness, right? So how am I displaying kindness to my beloved? Does not envy. One of the hardest things in marriage is you've got this competition of two egos. Right? And so we envy the other. We envy the attention. We envy the time. We envy their whatever it is. And there's this subtle competition where we're kind of one-upping our spouse all the time. And we envy each other. We're competing for recognition. We hate it when we're introduced as, oh, this is so-and-so's husband. It was so weird to me the other day. I learned what it's like to be my wife. Like we went and bought a house and we got kind of a loan because she's a veteran. And so it's silly. But it's a whole different thing. We went through this whole thing, and her name was the first name to be signed in every document because it's because of her military service. And it was very strange to me to be second on every page. And I'm like, this is what women deal with all the time when they're married. And I'm like rethinking everything, man. I'm like a feminist now all of a sudden because I write my name on the back of the page. I'm not as important as I was yesterday even. But in marriage, we have this envy, this personal ego envy, and we compete for things even with our spouse. The next one, it does not boast. It doesn't boast. A real question to stop and ask yourself, are my words full of praise for myself, or am I using my words to elevate my beloved? And not just are my words full of praise for myself, but you know what this means. Are they full of praise bait? Like you can say something to kind of bring up a topic so that they have to compliment you. Like, oh, did you see that? Did you see how I left that parking spot for you? Oh, you're the best, babe. You left that parking spot for me. Thanks. Oh, I was walking in the other day and I tripped over the dirt on the floor. Oh, and you cleaned it up. Thank you so much for that. Whatever it is. Or did you see the kids? Did you see the kids' hair? Oh, you dressed and combed the kids' hair. Congratulations. Whatever it is, we say these little things that are praise based, right? And we want to get a little bit of praise. And so the question is, love does not boast. Love is a commitment to use my words to elevate you rather than me. And if you have that in a marriage, oh my goodness, it's so. Love is not proud. I'm going to take, can I get a chair up here? It's going to take a minute. Love is not proud. It's learning to act in humility is probably the single greatest thing that you can do to build your happily ever after. Learning to act in humility. And I want to explain pride versus humility really quick with you. Pride is not thinking too much of yourself. Pride is simply thinking of yourself too much. So humility isn't convincing yourself you're ugly if you're pretty, or that you're dumb if you're smart, or that your teeth are yellow if they're white, or any other nonsense like that. That's not humility. In fact, trying to do that makes you more prideful because you're constantly fixated on yourself because you're trying to convince yourself of something that simply isn't true. Yes, you're pretty. Yes, you're smart. Yes, your teeth are white. It doesn't matter that much at all. Move on from it, right? And so that's humility, is the idea that my little things aren't any more important than anyone else's little things. And no one else cares that much. And so humility is to take the spotlight, whether it's negative or positive, off me and put it on someone else. Guys, pride is this crazy thing. It's like personal repellent, right? Have you guys ever used that like Deep Woods 20 million off deep that melts your skin when you put it on, but no insect is ever going to come near you, right? You become like the Fly movie or whatever. You've been mutated by it. It's gotten into your genome, but you're not going to get a mosquito bite, right? And so pride is like human repellent. And it just leeches off of you. And so you ever just notice you don't like somebody and you can't really figure out why. It's usually pride. It's like, that person just, I don't like even being around them. But the opposite of that, humility. And don't you love being around a person who is self-deferential, who just, you talk to them and all they want to know about is what's going on with you. They want to hear you, tell me more about that. Oh, that's great, But then you talk to someone and you bring up something really big in your life and be like, yeah, my mom just died yesterday. And then they launch into a 10-minute story about how their mom died 10 years ago. And you're like, let me know when you're finished and we'll get back to me. Right? humility. It's not about it. Anyway, we'll move on because none of us here are prideful, so we waste enough time. Love is not rude. You see, rudeness is not putting in the effort required to think about how your thoughts, your actions, your words land. You're only concerned with what you meant. And so if someone gets their feelings hurt, you have to stop being a baby. That's not what I meant. That's rudeness. Right? Not being rude is stopping to think. There's always a communication and experience barrier. And so I'm not just concerning myself with how the pitch is thrown. I'm concerning myself with how it's caught. Okay? And so not being rude is putting forward the extra thought ahead of time to think, man, what do I have to do? How should I say this? How should I approach this? Is this even a good time? Do I need to come back to this later, right? Is when they first come home from work the time to ask them why they didn't do this? You know what I'm saying? Like, rudeness is a total lack of concern. You're only concerned with expressing your feelings, your thoughts, getting it off your chest, and you're not concerned with how it lands. And so love is not rude. But then the other side of that is that love is not easily angered. Right? And so that's like the other side of the responsibility, is that we have to stop and remember that everyone's their own person with their own experiences, their own schedule, and they might be running late, and then that's why they, oh, of course you're rude, you cut me off, well, you think you're, and we've all been there. We've all thought that where we're going is more urgent than where everyone else is going. And so not being easily angered is the taking the time to stop and think that there's all these circumstances of other people's lives as well, and it's a decision to believe the best about it. They were in a hurry. I'm not going to let it bother. They probably didn't mean it that way. They probably didn't mean to insinuate that this shirt makes me look ugly, right? They probably didn't mean to insinuate that my food didn't taste good. They probably didn't mean to insinuate that I'm not good at this, right? So love is not easily angered. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Some of the most damaging things that can be said in an interpersonal relationship is, you always do this, you never do this, or this is just like when you, right? And you're making, guys, if I have to climb a mountain of everything I've ever done wrong to Karen, every time I wrong her, it's going to wear me out. And we're all the same. If you make your spouse climb a mountain of all of their wrongs every time they wrong you over again, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to just totally detach because it's not worth the effort to try. I guess there's three things. The other is they're going to blow up and stab you with a fork, right? I mean, and so you get some people later fight. You can't accept when you're wrong. Well, I can accept that I'm wrong this time, just I can't accept all the 28 times you just listed in reference to this to prove your point, right? And so love keeps no record of wrongs. Right? You're just going to exhaust people, or you'll turn people into that just deny. And they can never accept anything because there's just so much, you just have to require so much to be accepted in one circumstance. Well, if you expect me to accept that I'm always this way, I'm probably not going to. But if you say, hey, Bob, you ignored me yesterday, I'd really like some more of your attention in this circumstance, I can say, I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. Please forgive me. I'm going to do better. Does that make sense? So, love keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil. Man, it's poison to a friendship or a marriage or any kind of relationship when you kind of have this little axe to grind and you get a little bit happy when your spouse gets humiliated or put in their place, right? They think they're such a good partner. Look at that. Or how you guys have ever kind of quietly chuckled like before you paid the deductible because you and your spouse always argue about who's the worst driver, and then they have a wreck. You're like, well, I guess we know who's the worst man, right? And it's like, and we kind of get these quiet senses of satisfaction, right? And that's rejoicing in evil. Because I've told them they're this, right? I've told them they're that, and now their boss is making my case for me, right? And whatever it is, that's not love. Love doesn't delight in evil. Love seeks to protect the other. I want to make this really clear because some of us men, like, we're okay with, hey, I'll shoot anybody for you, babe. Show me your shoot. I bought this thing. I've cleaned it a bunch of times. I'm just waiting for the opportunity, okay? And then some of us are like, man, I wish you'd mob off to somebody, babe, because I'm ready to punch somebody, right? And so we're ready to defend people physically, but love, it protects, and that means in action and in word, right? And in emotion. We're protecting our spouse in every respect. Love protects. That means that we protect their body, their emotion, and their reputation. Right? And so when you get together with your friends and you tear them down, even though you're just venting or whatever else, you tear them down, you're not protecting them. You're holding them up for public shame. And love protects. Or here's one that my wife taught me really good. I don't know if you've noticed, you probably can't tell anymore, but I used to be sarcastic, okay? And so it was a really effective tool, sarcasm is. And I would make all these little funny barbs, these little jokes, and most of the time it's good-natured, it's humor, but sometimes it's how you resolve situations without having to be awkward. You can just make a joke about it, right? And so I'd make all these little jokes, and my wife at one point stopped me, and she said, listen, we hadn't been married very long, it was like 2.5 minutes, and she said, listen, your sarcasm's wearing me out. No, she said, listen, we can make fun of other people all we want. I mean, that's not true because it's not in the Bible. But anyway, we can make, this was her rule, not the Bible. We can make fun of other people all we want. But me and you, we're on the same team. We don't take shots at each other. And it took me some years. I cannot tell you how many times I had to hear, same team, babe, same team. And she was so good and so patient and she was so loving. And I'd make a joke, same team, babe, same team. And so now, like, before I say stuff in my head, sometimes I hear, same team. I would make fun of someone else instead. Right? Same team, right? And so that's why I always make fun of you guys. But anyway, no, that's what, same team. Because you're on the same team. Whether it's physically, emotionally, whatever. You're on the same team. We always protect. That's what love is. It always protects. It always trusts. That means in our actions that we believe the best about the other person. Always trust. We believe the best about their abilities or their intelligence or their good intentions. That's love. As few things are as poisonous as that automatic assumption that someone's intentions are always wrong. Right? Man, that's poisonous. Or as poisonous as someone that believes that someone else is incompetent and they're the only one that can do something right. And so there's this automatic assumption that you're going to mess it up. Here, give me this. You can't do this. Right? You can't. Let me help you out. Right? But man, always trust is that we trust that they're competent. We trust they can handle it. Right? Even, it's like sometimes it's hard in a relationship. Like, you kind of, oh, my husband can't take care of the kids. Right? And so sometimes what happens if we set a bar really low, people will perform to that bar. And so maybe if we trust, people will rise to the occasion. I'll say enough about that because I'm mad. Love always hopes. Always hopes. So to love about your beloved means that you just hope for the best always, and you assume that if I confront with this issue, if I say something, they're going to respond in a good way. They're going to hear that they've hurt me, and they're going to respond in a good way. We're always hopeful. Right? Love always hopes, and we're about finished here. Love always perseveres. It doesn't fail. Until death, this is how I'm going to love you. Now, I've heard people, and they mean well, and they say things like, we're not even going to say the word divorce, we're going to stay together forever. Like it's just something you can just set your will to and do. That's not what that's talking about. What that's saying is that I'm committing to love you like this until I die. Now, if you do that, you will never break the covenant. But if you think just deciding not to break the covenant is going to keep you from breaking the covenant, you can get pretty miserable, and at some point your will is going to give up. So if you want it to last, if you want it to never fail, then you've got to commit to love in this way. And if you love in this way, your love will always flourish, and it will never fail. See, it's not enough to say, I'm never going to leave. Love is to say, I'm never going to give up acting towards you in this way. No matter what you do, no matter anything else, no matter how hard life gets, I'm not going to give up acting towards you in this way. Now here's the thing. If you do that, then what you can have will be so much more beautiful and powerful than anything those super people ever had that Plato imagined. To love like that, though, it's committing a lot, right? That's a big commitment. And here's the thing, it's hard, and honestly, most of us struggle with so many different parts of that list, okay? And so the more stuff on that list, here's the thing. Here's why that list is great. It's not an all or nothing deal. Be like, sorry, babe, you missed it on point 3 and 6. You got the other 12, you're out, right? And so here's the thing. If you really work hard, you go, man, like, here's you and here's your spouse, and maybe you only got 1 or 2 of those, you know? They're kind of like this. You're becoming one, you know? And then over time, you strain, and I'm not very good at the keeping no record of wrongs, but I'm improving. I'm working hard on it. I'm going to stop doing it, right? And we're on the same team. I'm going to be more same team. And so then over time, it becomes more like that. Right? And then you go, man, we're gonna keep working on this thing, and you're together in this love and committed relationship. You're okay to tell each other ways that you're being hurt and that it's damaging the journey towards oneness. And so as you do that, maybe you become more kind, and you become more generous towards each other, and you become more thoughtful, and you protect each other more, and you hope more, and you become less easily angered over time. So it becomes like that, right? And you go further, and you go further, and you keep committing to growing in that way, and you keep doing it, and eventually what you get is oneness. And here's the thing. We're broken. We're subject to what people call, C.S. Lewis called it undulation. Humans do not go steadily for very long. So there's going to be times when you are going to undulate. You're not going to do very well. And that's why love never fails. Your spouse continues to love the same way during those times. And their love sets that bar for you to return to. Right? And then your love for them in the times when they undulate sets that bar for them to return to. Right? And then you have seasons in life like Valentine's Day when your pastor, comes and yells at you about it, and you go, man, I haven't been doing that very well. So then you rise back up and you press back towards it. But that's the thing, you're trying to get those 2 circles into one by following that list, loving actively in that way, and you'll be one. And so here's the thing, guys, happily ever after is available. It is attainable. But it's not an issue of finding your soulmate. It's not about running around desperately searching for the one who was cleaved from you in eons past. It's not about finding someone who completes you. The pressure of that expectation will damage your spouse and your marriage beyond belief. No other person can ever complete you, can ever give you the meaning and the purpose that you need. Listen. They are your partner, not your purpose. Right? The person sitting next to you, unless it's like your brother or something, they are your partner. They're not your purpose. God has a mission for you, and God has a mission for them, and it was too much for one person to do alone, so he said, here, let me give you a partner. And their labor together will be more fruitful than just one. Happily ever after is about you as a whole individual meeting a suitable person who is themselves a whole individual, and then promising to love each other in such a way that God, over the course of time, builds the 2 of you into one flesh. You didn't start off that way, but his plan is to help you finish that way. See, there's a reason, though, that Plato developed this notion of this severing. And it's because we were all severed from the one that we were built for in eternity past. There is something missing. Humanity was built for oneness with God. And the image of that super person, that is nothing in comparison to what we were capable of in this uninterrupted union with God the Father. But human sin cleaved us away from the one relationship that we all need. And that is the one relationship that's intended to define our lives. And that's the one with your Father in heaven. Without Jesus, without allowing Jesus to reconnect that defining relationship, you will never be whole. Not as an individual, not in your marriage, or any other way. You'll never be whole without that defining relationship. No great romance can fill the void left in your soul by God. So one of the best things you can do for eternity and even for your marriage now or your future marriage is to be clear about what that hole is and fill it with that, but then also to be clear about what marriage actually is and what it can do. Romance will never make a half person whole, only Jesus can. Your spouse cannot fulfill you, only Jesus can do that, and your spouse cannot be the purpose of your existence, only Jesus gives you purpose.
Amen.
But if you accept marriage as the great gift that it is, and if you invest love in it the way that that scripture described, then even though you didn't start off with a soulmate, God will build you one. So we'll finish with that scripture again. But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. And for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh, so that they are no longer two, but one. Let's pray. Father, we give you thanks, first and foremost, for the fact that you provided a solution to this hole, to this thing that we were severed from, you. And it's Jesus. Because Jesus came and lived the righteous life that all of humanity should have lived, but then died a death on the cross to accept the punishment for our sins. Because of that, we can be made right with you, and we can have this relationship with you restored. And so I pray right now, above anything else this morning, that if there's any of us here that have not made that decision to follow Jesus, to put our faith in Jesus and have that relationship restored, I pray that now that we would cross that line of faith in Jesus. And your word says it's really simple. If we believe in our hearts that Jesus is Lord and confess with our mouths, that we'll be saved. And this journey of following you begins. We begin this road of having this hole filled with the only thing that really fills it. But beyond that, God, I pray that you would make this truth of Scripture that we've been talking about today a concrete reality in our lives and our minds, and that would override this cultural picture that we tend to act upon. And that we would understand this great gift of love and of marriage. And that we would invest ourselves in such a way that you would bring this miracle of oneness to life in our own relationships. God, I pray for healing in relationships that are currently strained and broken. And I pray that even those that are good, that we would, in the days ahead, because we've committed to love in this way, that we would experience a kind of union and oneness that only you can make possible. We give you thanks for that. In Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, God bless you. Have a great day.